Number 35. On the 30th of July 2005, a passerby made a grim discovery in Cochise County. Scattered bones were found in a remote area north of Cochise College and east of State Route 90. Investigators determined the remains belonged to a young white male between 18 and 22 years old, approximately 5'9". Based on the condition of the remains, he was believed to have died sometime between 2003 and 2004. There were no personal belongings, no clothing descriptions, no obvious clues to reveal who he was. But unlike many unidentified cases, there was a possible lead. Authorities believe the young man may have been a local missing person connected to a 2004 report. For a time, it seemed the mystery might be close to being solved. Yet when investigators attempted to verify the connection in 2013, the effort failed. The evidence wasn't strong enough, the identification could not be confirmed, and so the young man remained unnamed. Was he truly the missing person investigators suspected, or was he someone else entirely? More than a decade after his remains were found, the uncertainty remained. Today he is still listed as a John Doe, a young man who may have a name waiting for him all along, but one that could not be proven, unidentified but not forgotten. Number 34. On the 31st of December 2005, a body was discovered in a tree-covered area on private property near Pearce. The man appeared to have been there for an unknown length of time. Authorities believed he was likely a border crosser. Investigators determined he was Hispanic or Latino, between 19 and 27 years old, around 5 foot and 140 pounds with brown hair. What immediately stood out were the extensive tattoos covering much of his body. One arm was a large image resembling a mask, surrounded by figures that could no longer be clearly identified. The other arm featured what appeared to be a sleeping woman wearing a large circular earring, surrounded by faces that may have resembled clowns. One leg bore the image of a standing man wearing a bandana. The other displayed a large skull wearing what looked like a jester's hat with a heart beneath it. The tattoos were elaborate, distinctive and deeply personal, yet none led investigators to his name. He wore black jeans, a dark blue shirt, striped boxer shorts, a dark blue baseball cap, white socks, blue athletic shoes, and a white sweater featuring an American flag design. Around his neck was a multicoloured beaded necklace. No identification was found, no documents, no confirmed family. Only the artwork etched into his skin remained to tell fragments of his story. Who was the young man covered in tattoos? Who recognised those designs when he was alive? And who never learned what became of him after he disappeared into the Arizona desert? Years later, the mystery remained unsolved. Today he is still a John Doe, a young man whose body carried countless images, but whose name was lost to time, unidentified but not forgotten. Number 33. On the 27th of September 2006, an employee working at Fort Huachuca made a grim discovery near Building 90336. Almost completely skeletonized human remains lay hidden in the landscape. Investigators determined the man was likely between 25 and 44 years old, approximately 5 feet tall, and white or Caucasian. Very little remained to tell his story. He wore blue jeans, 2 pairs of underwear, wore white socks, and tan and brown hiking boots. But scattered among the remains were a handful of personal belongings. A small black compass, a handmade red cloth bag containing fragments of black rocks, a worn key, a wrapped pill, a tube of lip balm, and perhaps the most significant clue of all, 5 Guatemalan quetzales and a Mexican 2-peso bill, items that suggested a long journey across borders. Investigators later considered whether he might be a missing Guatemalan national named Rolando Eduardo Gomez Valdez, but the evidence was never strong enough to confirm it. So the mystery remained. Who was the man carrying a compass through the Arizona desert? Why did he keep the small bag of stones? And was he truly Rolando, or someone whose name has yet to be discovered? Today he remains a John Doe, a traveller found with only a compass, a few coins and unanswered questions, unidentified but not forgotten. Number 32. On the 5th of May 2007, a US Border Patrol agent discovered the body of a man along a known migrant trail. east of Miller Peak in the Huachuca Mountains. The remote mountain route had become a passage for countless travellers seeking a new life. For one man, it became the end of the journey. Investigators determined he was Hispanic or Latino, approximately 5'3" and 151 pounds with brown hair. He was dressed for the mountain conditions: 2 pairs of jeans, thermal clothing, a long-sleeve dress shirt, a Pacific Trail jacket and 2 pairs of socks. Among his belongings were a toothbrush, toothpaste, an orange Bic lighter, pens, business cards and pieces of paper. Everyday items carried by someone expecting to continue onward. But there was one thing he did not have: identification. No name, no documents, no way to tell investigators who he was or who might be searching for him. Who was the man found on the Miller Peak Trail? Where had he started his journey? And did someone spend years wondering why he never arrived? The mountain kept its secrets. Today he remains a John Doe, a traveller found on a well-worn path, carrying everything he needed for the road ahead, except a way home. Number 31. On the 21st of September 2007, human remains were discovered near Wilcox. The location was lonely and exposed, just 21 feet from a set of railroad tracks. Investigators determined the remains belonged to a white male between 35 and 56 years old, approximately 5'7". He had grey or partially grey hair mixed with brown. The clothing he wore was simple: faded jeans, a worn t-shirt, black socks and white Nike tennis shoes. Among his possessions were only 2 items: a blue Bic lighter and $1 in cash. Nothing else: no wallet, no identification, no photographs, no letters, no clue strong enough to tell investigators who he was. Had he been travelling along the railroad? Was he searching for work, a destination, or simply a place to belong? And how long had he been laying there before someone finally noticed? The tracks carried trains across the country, but they carried no answers. Today the man found beside the rails remains a John Doe, a stranger with $1 in his pocket, and a story that was never told. Unidentified but not forgotten. Number 30. On the 22nd of December 2007, a hiker walking through a remote area of Cochise County came upon a grim discovery: human remains, alone in the desert. Investigators determined the remains belonged to a Hispanic or Latino male between 18 and 40 years old, approximately 5'6". Based on the evidence, he may have died any time between 2004 and 2007. Years could have passed before anyone found him. He wore tan jeans, a reversible leather belt, and ankle-high boots. Only a single sock remained. Among his belongings were just 2 items: a white and blue toothbrush and 4 20-peso bills. Small possessions carried by someone who may have been planning for a long journey ahead. Authorities believed he was an undocumented border crosser, but beyond that very little is known. Who was he? How far had he travelled before reaching the Arizona desert? And who was left waiting for a call that never came? The toothbrush and the money survived. His name did not. Today he remains a John Doe, a man found by chance in the desert, carrying only a few pesos and the hope of reaching somewhere beyond the horizon. Unidentified but not forgotten. Number 29. On the 22nd of January 2008, a hunter travelling through Bodie Canyon spotted something unusual on the ground: a human skull. The discovery was reported to authorities and sheriff's deputies returned to search the area. What they found was even more troubling: human remains scattered in the rugged canyon landscape. Investigators determined the remains belonged to a white male between 25 and 44 years old, approximately 5'6". Time and the elements had erased nearly everything that might have revealed who he was. Only one piece of clothing remained: a pair of blue boxer shorts decorated with yellow, Google-eyed cartoon figures. An oddly personal detail. A reminder that remains belonged to a real person with an ordinary life before becoming a mystery. No wallet, no identification, no personal belongings. No clues to explain how he arrived in the canyon or how long he had been there. Who was the man discovered in Bodie Canyon? Was he local to the area, or had he travelled somewhere far away? And how does someone disappear so completely that only a skull is left to tell the story? The canyon offered no answers. Today he remains a John Doe, a man remembered only by a single pair of boxer shorts and the mystery left behind amongst the rocks, unidentified but not forgotten. Number 28. On the 22nd of September 2008, US Border Patrol agents were tracking a group of suspected undocumented border crossers through the remote desert of Cochise County. What they found instead was something unexpected: human remains. The individual had no identification, no known name, and few clues left behind to explain who he was. Investigators determined the remains belonged to a Hispanic or Latino male between the ages of 18 and 99, a wide estimate that reflected just how little evidence remained. No clothing details were recorded, no personal belongings were documented, only bones and questions. Was he part of the group Border Patrol had been following, or had he died there months or even years earlier, unnoticed by everyone who passed nearby? Somewhere, someone may have wondered why he never returned home. A family may have searched. Friends may have waited for a phone call that never came. But in the Arizona desert, those answers disappeared. Today he remains a John Doe, a man discovered along a trail used by countless travellers, yet whose own journey ended in silence, unidentified but not forgotten. Number 27. On the 26th of October 2008, hunters exploring a remote area of Cochise County made a disturbing discovery: human remains. They immediately notified the US Border Patrol, who then contacted local authorities. Investigators determined the remains belonged to a Hispanic or Latino male between 25 and 44 years old, approximately 5'2". Authorities believed he was likely a border crosser. The man had been dressed for a long journey. He wore blue jeans, green trousers layered beneath or alongside them, a white t-shirt, a green short-sleeve shirt, a white tank top, and blue and white underwear. A grey Adidas baseball cap remained with him, as did a single brown leather shoe, small details that survived long after his identity was lost. There was no wallet, no identification, no note explaining where he came from or where he hoped to go, only clothing and silence. Who was the man in the Adidas cap? How far had he travelled before his journey ended in the Arizona desert? And who, somewhere, still wonders what happened after he disappeared? The desert kept those answers for itself. Today he remains a John Doe, a traveller found by hunters, remembered only through the clothes he wore on his final journey, unidentified but not forgotten. Number 26. On the 7th of January 2009, human remains were discovered near a trailhead in Cochise County. Authorities believed the man was likely an undocumented border crosser, but by the time he was found, his journey and his identity had already been lost. Investigators determined he was a Hispanic or Latino male, approximately 5'2" and 120 pounds. He had short black hair and brown eyes. A few distinctive features survived: 2 scars on his chest and a birthmark on the lower part of his right thigh. Details that might have been recognisable by someone who knew him. He wore green trousers layered with blue jeans, a black t-shirt, grey briefs, and a mismatched black and brown socks. Curiously, he was found without shoes or a jacket. Whether they were lost, removed, or taken remains unknown. Among his belongings were a red and white comb, a black beaded necklace bearing images of the Virgin Mary and Christ, and surprisingly a large amount of money, $170 and 20 Mexican pesos, items suggesting that he may have been carrying everything he had, perhaps enough to start over somewhere new. But he never reached his destination. Who was the man found at the trailhead? Why was he missing his shoes and jacket? And who still remembers the scars and birthmark that investigators hoped would one day identify him? The answers remain hidden in the desert. Today he remains a John Doe, a traveller carrying faith, hope, and the means to continue his journey, but never the chance to finish it. Unidentified but not forgotten. Number 25. On the 18th of January 2009, hunters exploring a remote desert area near Huachuca City came across human remains. The discovery would begin another mystery with few answers and no name. Investigators determined the man was approximately 5'6" and 131 pounds, with grey or partially grey hair. His age could not be accurately determined, leaving only a broad estimate of adulthood. What made the case unusual was his clothing. He wore a black flight suit, along with a red t-shirt, black trousers, a black and white wool cap, a green fleece head covering, black gloves, dress socks and tan boots. The layers suggested someone prepared for cold conditions in the desert mountains. Among his possessions were only a few practical items: a pair of sunglasses, a small flashlight designed to fit around a finger, and a blue disposable lighter. Nothing that could identify him. No wallet, no documents, no indication of where he came from or where he was headed. Who was the man in the flight suit? Why was he travelling through such a remote area? And how did someone carrying so little leave behind so few clues? The hunters found his remains, but the desert kept the rest of his story. Today he remains a John Doe, a man remembered only for the unusual clothing he wore and the mystery he left behind. Unidentified but not forgotten.